Peru prepares to host this year's APEC meetings. What's on the agenda? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC as it's commonly known, is a leading forum that promotes trade, investment, economic growth and regional cooperation. Its 21-member Pacific Rim economies account for almost half of the world's trade, nearly 40% of the global population and about 60% of the world's GDP. CGTN's Dan Collins has more on APEC, its agenda and impact on this year's host country, Peru.
The hosting of the APEC Meetings 2024 could not have come at a better time for Peru. As the Andean country recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, it's hoped that the annual meeting of Pacific Rim members will give the economy a much-needed boost.
APEC itself is very important. 60% of the world economy is generated by the 21 economies. 50% of world trade is generated by those economies, and in that group is the biggest economy in the world, United States, the second biggest China, and the 4 or 5 Japan. So first, because of that summit that's going to be held at the middle of November, the world attention will be in Peru.
Peru's foreign ministry announced that 16 leaders, including presidents and prime ministers, will take part in the mid-November meeting. This is where business leaders and heads of state will be mingling next week, signing off Peru hopes on new deals that will give the nation a better footing in the global economy. But that's not the only plus point for Peru. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit to inaugurate a huge Chinese-built megaport on the Pacific coast. The multi-purpose port in Chancay, 80 kilometers north of Lima, is expected to become a hub for trade between Asia and Latin America. Its launch coincides with the APEC meetings, as the $3.6 billion port is set to be up and running by the end of the year. Part of the Belt and Road Initiative, the facility will be the first in the region to have the capacity to berth some of the world's biggest cargo ships. By slashing freight times by as much as 12 days, the new port will cut costs and make Peruvian products, from textiles to minerals to fruit and vegetables, more competitive.
We have been very close to the US for several decades, no? And now, in the last years, of course, China has been very active, no, in terms of participating in our trade flows and investment, no. The way we see it is that these two big guys will set up their own policies, and we have to check, and see what is best for Peru.
This will be the third time Peru has hosted the APEC meetings, and Peruvians are enthusiastic about the employment and investment opportunities.
I would like this year's APEC to address the issue of investments and the opportunities they will provide. I would like to see more companies created so that there are more opportunities and more work for many Peruvians, and the economy improves for everyone.
More and more youngsters are studying Chinese Mandarin in order to take full advantage of the opportunities. With so many nations situated around the Pacific, Peru wants to open its doors to all APEC members as it welcomes new economic possibilities. Dan Collins, CGTN, Lima.
Joining us is the head of the World Economic Forum's Asia-Pacific Agenda, Ju Ok Lee. Mr. Lee, thanks so much for joining us. APEC's theme is Empower, Include, Grow. The focus is on sustainability and resilience, empowering the vulnerable and promoting digital opportunities and growing economies. How can the World Economic Forum contribute to those goals?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I'd like to answer that question from the World Economic Forum, which is the international organization for public-private cooperation. We deeply value the role of partnership, and especially when we look at APEC's priorities for this year, we understand that there's a very strong emphasis on uplifting the vulnerable parts of different societies and economies. And in that sense, we feel that there is a contribution that can be made from a platform, a public-private collaboration platform like the forums. One particular example I'd like to share is the work that we do with indigenous communities. And in this year's APEC summit, as well as all the processes that are leading up to it, in trying to uplift the different communities, focusing on the vulnerable parts, we feel that there is a particular role that indigenous communities can actually bring. One part of highlighting their products and services can not only lead to protecting both the environment but also the cultural heritage. I think highlighting the work that indigenous communities do, as Asia Pacific, the broader region hosts more than 70% of the global indigenous population, it can have a huge impact also to introducing new products and services, and therefore really have a positive impact for not just those communities themselves, but also the broader economies. And we are delighted that there's a lot of attention being paid to this work, and the set of meetings that we are co-organizing with APEC, in terms of being sponsored by likes of Australia, as well as being co-sponsored by other member economies, we're delighted to contribute to that work.
Right. If you're working with indigenous communities, that must tie in very closely with efforts right now by the United Nations to preserve biodiversity, which is something that is high up on the goals of the UN, as well as fighting climate change.
Definitely. As I mentioned before, there is, of course, a very important side impact to helping those communities because of the role that they play in preserving the biodiversity, the richness of the environment, and also preserving their way of life, which is vital, I think, as assets for this planet.
Right. We're also going through a time right now of major geopolitical and economic challenges. I mean, what does APEC need to do to enhance economic cooperation to promote inclusive and sustainable growth?
So as a structure, as a platform of its own, APEC, I think, can play a number of different very positive roles. One is, of course, reinforcing the importance of the multilateral trading system, the rules-based order in which member economies can actually tackle challenges, and also focus on issues of mutual interest, such as preparing for natural disasters, mitigating the risks related to it, and also focusing on critical issues like health amongst the different countries that are involved. Another important aspect could be around revitalizing the conversations towards a free trade agreement within the Asia Pacific. I think something that was teed up and also suggested more than 2 decades ago, I think could gain momentum within this specific geopolitical and geo-economic landscape, and APEC could have a vital role in making significant advancements towards that.
You mentioned a free trade agreement, but where do you see significant opportunities for economic cooperation and growth in the Asia-Pacific region? And I'm thinking especially of the development of digital infrastructure.
Thank you. Definitely. I think harnessing the power of digitalization, innovation is one area in particular that the region can collectively focus on. As we know that Asia Pacific is, of course, home to a growing, thriving, and very tech-savvy digital population, we feel that harnessing that power would definitely bring a lot of value to individual member economies as well as for collectively the region. In pushing ahead with, of course, some of these advantages that the region holds, the region, of course, should not forget that there are significant digital divides that they have to overcome. So bridging that gap, laying critical digital infrastructure where there is a lack of that, but also really focusing on the role beyond the digital sector and seeing how digitalization and innovation can also foster advancement in different areas, such as mitigating the risks of climate change and also pushing ahead with green technology. I think there are many different areas that member economies' collaboration on this front could really harness. And I also want to add that focusing again on this year's APEC priorities, really looking at sectors that are vulnerable, that don't necessarily have the power to really leverage these technologies. I think whether we look at micro, small, medium-sized enterprises or indigenous communities, as we discussed before, I think digital can collectively bring a lot of benefits for the region as a whole.
Right, you mentioned the digital divide. That's the risk of some countries not progressing as fast in digital development as others. How does one overcome that?
It's a very good question. I think, over the past decades, collectively as a humanity, we've employed many different solutions. One solution in particular that the World Economic Forum is conducting together with our partners is to really try and focus on the use cases, on what really gets people not only connected, but also in actively utilizing the digital environment. So we've partnered with companies primarily in financial sectors, health sectors, education sectors to really develop strong cases for digital uses in parts of the world where digital infrastructure is lacking, and simultaneously with working with governments to lay those critical infrastructure, we've really tried to deliver on the advantages of being digital. And I think so far we're seeing a lot of success. What we call the Edison Alliance, since the start of this initiative, we've connected more than 1 billion population to the digital network. And I think with more partners and governments partnering with us, I think we'll be able to make a lot more progress, especially in the Asia-Pacific region.
Right. The WEF says that the countries of the Asia-Pacific region have had enormous success in reducing poverty and reducing hunger, but now they face new challenges, and these are challenges that are related to climate change. And these hazards threaten things like food security. They have also triggered human displacement. We see that, and it's happening on an unprecedented scale. We also see conflicts over land, over water, access to food as well. That's also rising. What needs to be done to get things back on track?
So I think this is a very opportune time to discuss these issues as we are coming out of a number of significant international milestones that specifically try to discuss and tackle these issues. We've seen efforts in Colombia, and we're heading into different discussions that we will see play out in Baku in Azerbaijan. When it comes to all of the challenges that you've mentioned, I think what is key is really partnership, and not just international collaboration as business as usual, but really sort of doubling down on critical aspects like financing. How can countries developing and also developed advanced economies work together to find financing solutions? I think will be one critical aspect. And then another thing is really developing and doubling down on enhancing the resilience of countries and regions. I think as we see more unprecedented, but also very unexpected challenges take place, whether they're geopolitical conflicts or impact from climate change, we feel more and more the importance of investing in making countries, societies, and regions more resilient. And I think increasingly that effort will be much more important as we go forward.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us. There's much more to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Wang Huiyao is the founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization. Yan Liang is a chair professor in economics at Willamette University, and Diego Macero serves as director of the Peruvian Institute of Economics and the Central Reserve Bank of Peru. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Diego Macero, let me start with you. This is a time of major geopolitical change we see across the globe. It's a multipolar world we live in right now. There's also a lot of challenges. There are economic headwinds, things like inflation, very slow growth, and many, many countries that are still trying to emerge from the pandemic. So what do you expect out of this APEC meeting?
Well, thank you for the opportunity of coming here. This is a great opportunity for Peru to be on the spotlight. I think we have a very good case in the midst of the turmoil that you're mentioning. Peru has been part of this political instability, has affected so many countries in the last few decades. However, it has proved it's a country that has proved to be remarkably stable when it comes to economic terms, especially macroeconomy. This is a country that is one of the most open for foreign investment, with a very stable currency, perhaps with the lowest inflation on average for the decade, for the century really, on Latin America. Investment grade, good growth for the last century, #1 for the region. So I think despite all the headwinds that you were mentioning, Peru stands out as a country that still is resilient in the midst of this chaos that we've been watching for the last few years.
Right, Wang Huiyao, I was looking at some of the issues on the agenda at this APEC meeting, and among them are things like digitalization and innovation, sustainable development, regional development, and social inclusion. And the host country, Peru, also wants to talk about the informal business sector. It's an ambitious agenda. What are your expectations?
Well, I think this is a very important conference. I mean, probably watched also worldwide just after the major election in the U.S. And also, as you mentioned, there's quite a few agendas there. But I think the economic growth probably is still the very high agenda for all the APEC member countries. And of course, also digital, also other development that is on the mind of this country. And I think this is important that we have to reiterate the APEC spirit, and also we have to revitalize the APEC. The APEC has been getting quite a bit slow now, and with also, the multipolar world is coming, and then we also have other Indo-Pacific, or you have many other similar IPEF and all those very different structure coming up. But we need to really stick to the APEC, which is over 30 years and has actually produced a lot of good results in the past. And also, the old days we talked about free trade agreement for the Asia Pacific area. I think that's a dream that actually proposed initially by the United States. So we have to really come down to the fundamentals of economic development, digital development, sustainable development, and of course, climate change and also a clean green transition. Those are the things that I think the world needs the most, and need leaders to talk about those key areas of development, rather than we're divided by ideological divide or by so-called democracy or autocracy, this kind of a divide, and then really we need to concentrate. So APEC has made a good example for that, and we need to strengthen that at this time.
Yan Liang, China is deeply invested in development in Latin America, and it does so through things like the Belt and Road Initiative, through trade, through bilateral agreements as well. It's also the main trading partner. One of the biggest projects that's currently underway that is being financed by a Chinese company is the $3.6 billion port that is being developed, deepwater port on the Peruvian coast. It's been called a game changer, but could you sort of give us some perspective on this? How does this enhance trade among Pacific Rim countries?
Right, good to talk to you, Anand. So I just want to quickly echo what Dr. Wang has been talking about. I think, as we are seeing globalization, we're seeing some of the fragmentation in the world, I think it's all the more important for APEC to play a bigger role, right? This is a forum that includes about 1/3 of the global population, 54% of the global GDP, and 44% of trade. So there's a great potential, I think, for countries that come from very different political and economic backgrounds to come together and talk about cooperation and, confronting the common challenges. And this time around, we have many new leaders, right? Singapore, Thailand, New Zealand, and Japan. Many of the new leaders will meet and they will talk about what would work as far as these main agendas are concerned. So you're right, trade, investment, innovation, and sustainable development are really the main key, I think, aspects that will be discussed at this forum. And China played a very important role in all three aspects. So China is the largest trade partners of Peru and Chile. China is also, of course, the largest trade partners of the ASEAN countries. 7 out of 10 ASEAN countries are represented in the APEC. So I think it's very important that China is playing a key role here in promoting regional trade and investment integration. And China, of course, also played a very important role in terms of innovations, technological sharing, and companies like Huawei has been building very important 5G network and improving digital integration and connectivity in Peru and Chile. And you just mentioned the port, and I think that is also very important as a physical infrastructure, in addition to many of the roads that China built and upgraded in these countries. And finally, I think the importance of sustainable development. China has been building a lot of renewable energy projects in Latin American countries. So I think China is playing really a lead role in all three fronts, and China is willing to work with all these different countries and really have a collaborative and cooperative way forward.
Diego, Peru joined APEC in 1998, and since then its trade with other members in that group has grown on average 12% a year, and 66% of Peru's trade takes place with other APEC members. We're talking about the deepwater port here, Shanghai, that port over there. I mean, it will not just be of benefit to Peru, of course, because there's this huge hinterland that's going to be serviced by that port. So what is the growth potential for a country like Peru with that port being, be opened very soon?
So the figures actually of trade with China are even better than the ones you mentioned. We've been growing for the 21st century. We've been growing close to 20% on exports to China every year, and imports are close to 18% growth for this last quarter century. So the figures are really remarkable on how fast the trade has been growing between China and Peru. This port will probably be a game changer, not only in trade aspects, which we're hoping to benefit Peru and other countries in the region. It could also mean a more industrial investment here, coming from Chinese companies that might put their factories, might put their installation factories around the port area. Right now, Peruvian Congress is debating a special economic zone that might happen around the port. A key aspect for the development, for this to be a successful initiative, would be to have an international standard operator. So we need to have an operator of this, manager of this special economic area that can actually provide the services that the companies need to build and to have working factories around the port. And as a part of an internal agenda, Peru needs to also, the Peruvian government, the Peruvian state, needs to also offer facilities in terms of electricity, transportation, and others. So this could be very big if done correctly.
Dr. Wang, you were talking a moment ago about digitalization, the importance of the digital economy, but one of the challenges is that many developing countries could fall behind, what's called the digital divide. And one of the reasons for that is lack of investment. How big a challenge is this going to be to make sure that these countries don't fall behind as the world progresses towards more digital economies?
Absolutely. I think we are embracing the global digital revolution, or big great transformation which is going on right now. And China is, of course, is already in the lead of that. For example, just in China has more than 4 million 5G stations. And I think of Europe is only 400,000. So you can see Of course, there's vast developing countries, Latin America and many Asia-Pacific countries need that. And China has worked very well with ASEAN and with all those countries on the digital transformation. And then China is of course, the second largest digital economy in the world, and probably later would become the largest. So, but the thing is that I think we have to really work on that. We cannot divide among each other. For example, Huawei and many digital companies are really restricted in quite a lot of Western countries. That is not good, because we have to think about, all the global South countries, and they cannot really pick a side, and we cannot have two silos, two systems. That would be huge waste, and it's not fair for the development. So digital economy, we need to have really some global governance in place. We need to really build up the standards, and of course have the consensus, and of course, organizations like APEC and G20 should really put forward, a global standard, and really set aside the ideological differences. And then that's very important to help in the global developing countries for digital transformation, which is badly needed.
All right, Yang Liang, I've just got a little time left, just over a minute, and I'm wondering what kind of progress do you expect to see in some of these key areas where China itself has made substantial progress, things like sustainable energy transition, technical cooperation, as well as in finance?
Right, absolutely. So again, echo what Dr. Wang is talking about in terms of digital connectivity. Huawei has been rolling out many of the 5G network. Huawei and also Unicorn has been building the submarine undersea telecommunication network, that would connect South America to Europe and to Africa. So all of these hard infrastructure is being rolled out in, South America and Latin America. So I think that would be tremendously helpful. Huawei is also building a lot of training centers in Latin America, so that would really help to bridge the digital gap, right, by equipping some of the skills to the local people. Right. And in terms of the financing, as you just mentioned, BRI, we start to see an increase again in 2023 after several years of a decline. So I think there will be more in terms of providing financing for sustainable development, energy transition, and also to build more this kinds of connectivity and smart yet beautiful, smart yet smart projects all around Asia and also Latin America.
Okay, that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.